So what we all need to be doing better is making sure that we're doing what we're saying we're doing.
Thanks for being with us today, Fiona. You've dedicated your career to the topic of sustainability even before it was en vogue. Why is that?
Well, thanks for having me, Annabelle. Well, I started working in the superannuation or pension system in Australia back in the 90s when this was just introduced. And to me, this was a new initiative that I saw as a great social policy that was about how did we really make sure that finance was there for the many and not for the few. As the superannuation, the pension funds grew, it really became clear that you had to have a different mindset when you were thinking about investing. Because, you know, if I'm a young person today going into a pension fund, I'm not going to take that money. I'm not going to have access to it for 40, 50, 60 years. So those funds need to be thinking about all the risks that are coming at them, not just in a quarter, you know, about in the quarter, not just in the year, but what's coming at me in the next 10, 20, 30 years. That does lead you to have to worry about a whole lot of other risks. So environmental risks, social risks and governance risks were very clearly things that need to be considered. And so that's what led me into the sustainability space. But I think at the end of the day, for me, it's really about the fact that we have to balance people, profit and planet. Fantastic. I have got no problem with people making as much money in the world as they possibly can. You know, that's a good thing. We create jobs, all of those sorts of things. But at the end of the day, we can't invest in a way that doesn't recognise that there aren't planetary boundaries, because there are, and we can't pollute the planet, and we can't exploit people to make money as well. And I don't think at the end of the day, a lot of people expect that the way that their pension funds invest, they don't want those things to happen, because they want to not only have money in retirement, they want to live in a good world in retirement, and all of those things need to come together.
Thanks, Fiona. And what do you think might be the consequences if we neglected that longer term thought process, the longer term horizon and those ESG factors you mentioned? Or what do we gain by addressing those issues?
Well, I think if we're not thinking about the long term and all we're thinking about is today and what is the stock market doing today and what's my returns today and on the quarter, then we do lose sight of other issues, other longer term issues. We will never address them because we're just thinking about the now. And if we continue to do that, we see what a lack of action on climate change means. We see around the world all of the natural disasters that are happening. The 100-year flood that's now happening every year. The fires that are only supposed to happen every 100 years, but happen each second season. So we see the damage we do see the damage that is happening. And the end result, if we ignore them, is, as I was saying, you go into your retirement, you might have a nice pot of money, but you might not have a very good world to live in. And we all have a responsibility as citizens, but as business and as investors, to protect the natural world, the world that we want to retire and live in.
Absolutely. And what concrete actions do you think are needed to progress on these topics, on both an individual and societal level?
Well, I think when it comes to climate, if we just take the climate issue, that it does need the input of everybody. Everybody needs to be taking action. But I do think that the private sector's got a huge role to play, and the private sector are the ones who can really be coming up with innovative solutions. We need solutions to the problems that we have in the world, and investors and business can sit down with governments and work out long-term plans. What is it that we need to stop us investing in fossil fuels? We're not going to do it until we've got solutions. We're not going to sit in the dark. We need to see renewables scaled up. Investors can invest in those things. Businesses can create them. Governments can provide solutions. So I think it needs to be a whole of society plan, I think led by government with the right incentives.
And is that something you're optimistic about, or is there something else in addition to that that you're optimistic about?
Optimistic. That might be an overstatement that I'm optimistic. I would say that with recent actions from the US government, with the IRA, where there's so much incentive for investment, that makes me feel like there's some hope. Otherwise, I feel like we've got the world's attention in terms of people are paying attention to these issues now, but I worry that we're not working at the pace that we actually need to. So will we get to net zero by 2050? I'm not so sure.
So with increasing litigation and regulation, greenwashing has been brought front of mind. We think the underlying intention of an ESG initiative is crucial, though that's potentially quite difficult to distinguish. What do you view as the most important consideration for financial firms and perhaps corporates as well? And what do you think we can do better?
Well, I think that for financial firms, you should actually be doing what you say you're doing. And if you've got a product that says that it's a certain thing, then that should be what it is. So there's a role, obviously, for labelling, but at the end of the day, I think it's truth in advertising that we need to do.
Rules on mis-selling products have been around for a while, whether that's financial products or consumer products. Though there is usually a price premium for green products. Is greenwashing that different? Is it simply harder to prove, do you think?
I do think there has been an issue. There is and has been an issue with greenwashing. I think there's too many claims that are being made that aren't true. I live in Australia. We've just recently had a lot of work by the regulators. One regulator, for example, is taking on a superannuation fund for claims that it's made. It has said that it's something that that is not true. Well, it's still going through the process, but as a consumer, I think people have a certain level of expectation. The ACCC, the Australian Consumer Commission, it just recently did a big review of business and looked at all the claims that businesses were making. And in the report that it put out, it said 57% of businesses, the claims they made weren't completely correct. So what we all need to be doing better is making sure that we're doing what we're saying we're doing. But it's not always easy, particularly when you've got really large institutions. Is everything aligned across the organisation? The people doing the investments versus the marketing people versus the people who are out on the road selling the products. Is everyone clear about these things? I suppose there's a lot of work that's coming into play at the moment around the world about labelling and definitions. Hopefully that will help us all to be able to use the same language and that people can be clear about what it is that they're actually getting.
Amid some of the litigation that we've seen coming out about greenwashing, there's also been growing talk of green hushing or green bleaching, where the environmental attributes of products are understated or omitted. Do you think this is the start of a transition towards green products being more mainstream or standard, or do you think this could potentially be dangerous or a missed opportunity?
At the end of the day, I would really hope that if we talk about ESG, for example, that we don't have responsible investment. I hope at the end of the day we don't have to use these terms anymore, because all investment is done in a way that considers environmental issues, social issues, governance issues, and all investment is responsible. But in the meantime, some of the green hushing, I'm not sure. I think it's for different reasons. I think some of the green hushing is because there are in some countries and regions some backlash against ESG issues. So people are thinking, well, I'm going to do these things because I have to think about them as a risk, but I don't want to talk about them. I want to be a lot more quiet about what I'm doing.
Traceability has gained a lot of traction in the ESG space in the past few years. In your view, what role does traceability play in the context of ESG products and greenwashing?
I think traceability is absolutely essential. If we look at an issue like modern slavery and human trafficking, any big multinational company in the world, I think, will find that it has some form of modern slavery. The only way that it can really verify that it doesn't and look into its supply chain is by being able to trace its product. So the advancements in technology that allow better traceability, I think, are fantastic and really, really vital.
Do we need to rethink the definition of greenwashing? Does it need to be expanded to focus on other ESG-related misleading claims? Where do you see the challenges and what might be the big opportunities here if we do kind of change that definition and incorporate other aspects of the ESG space?
Well, I think some of that is starting to happen. I mean, you do hear people obviously talking about greenwashing, but I equally hear people talk about rainbow washing. I hear people talking about SDG washing. So all of those labels, I think, are coming into play. And we don't just, in the ESG space, there can be, I think at the moment, a lot of focus on climate and a lot of focus on the environment. And it's meant that some of the other issues have sort of been pushed into the background. Now, of course, the climate side is really important because it's an emergency. We need to be moving. But that doesn't mean some of the human rights issues, other ESG issues, anti-bribery and corruption, good governance, aren't also extremely important and urgent that we address. So in some ways, I hope that we can see through just thinking about the green side and move into some of those areas and making sure, again, if someone, for example, has an impact fund and it makes claims about what that impact is, that they can demonstrate it at the end of the day.
Thanks very much for being with us again today, Fiona Reynolds. Great to have you here, and look forward to your further participation in the forum.
Thanks, Annabelle. It's been really great to talk to you.